this computer. And I'm going to hand over at this point to Eckhart. So I will stop my sharing.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Anne. Yeah, I want to welcome you all here in this virtual room. We are really overwhelmed because we have such a great interest. We have on the registration list almost 150 people. Now about 80 entered, so we will have maybe some 70 more. We have people from 30 European countries. So really just Bulgaria, Serbia, Kosovo, and Latvia are missing. All others are here in this room. And I also can say that we have about 30% guests in our group, and 60% are, 70% are more or less related to Pro Silva in some kind of way. I'm very happy to have very prominent guests here, and I want just to mention 4 names. We have Marco Onida from the European Commission, DG Environment, who is leading the forest strategy process. Then I welcome Robert Mauser from Slovenia. He's a Deputy Director of the European Forest Institute. And then we have our old friend Bo Larsen. I think he's also here in the group from Denmark. And also Thomas Hausmann. I had contact with him yesterday. He's now heading Forest Europe. So we have representatives from the most important forestry organizations and also political parts that are dealing now with this new orientation of forestry. For those who are not Pro Silva members, I just make a short explanation. Pro Silva uses a Latin name because we wanted to bridge all language differences all over Europe. And we exist since 1989. At first, it was a circle of silvicultural professors, and now we are, I think, one of the biggest networks combining scientists, practitioners, and all other administration, forest administration, etc., foresters, really from different positions. Therefore, this mixture is very important. Our orientation was always based on the sustainability principles as defined by Forest Europe, also centuries ago. And I want to mention that timber utilization is one main pillar, and this will also be in the future. But this is based on ecosystem management. How we came to this position, how now to discuss in this big audience. I was invited to a conference in Brussels, Forest for Biodiversity and Climate, and there were four DG, the general directors involved. So it was a combination of environmental, of agri, of climate, and it also touches rural development. So this is a forest touches 4 fields of action, so that's very important to cover all these. Yeah, we wanted to go into discussion and also to show that we have a broad representation of our principles from Mediterranean region to the Boreal region, from Western Europe to Central Europe. And this is the reason why we invited 5 speakers. They may introduce themselves a little bit more in detail, but I just want to name them and welcome them on the podium. So we have João Carvalho from University from Northern Portugal, representing Mediterranean region. We have Juri Diaci, Professor for Silviculture in Ljubljana, Slovenia. He covers Central Europe and the Balkans. We have Sauli Valkonen from Finland, who is an expert in boreal forestry. And we have Tomáš Brška from Czech Republic, representing Central to Northern or Eastern Europe. And he will show us something about these big calamities in the Czech Republic and how to deal with this. And the last one, but not the least, is Bill Mason from Scotland, who is representing the CCFG, Continuous Forestry Group in Britain and UK. And he is retired professor in Scotland, and he's also in the same working group where 4 of the others are in, and I think this is enough for an introduction. I'm happy that you are here. Now we have 92 and in the forum, and not to lose much time, I will hand over back to Anne, and she will give the floor to the 4 initial speakers. Thank you. Anna, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. First up is Zhao, and I believe he's going to share his own, or am I going to share for him? We need to take him off mute anyhow, so we'll ask him to unmute. And he's going to share himself. So great, thank you.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Is it all ready?
You just need to start the show, but you're pretty good.
Okay.
Yep.
It's ready now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I would like to send regards to my colleagues and to the audience. And well, being the first speaker, I also would like to thank the contribution given by the delegates from different countries to the questionnaire for the paper we prepared and all the elements provided. So I would like to start commenting just a few issues very briefly because of time restrictions. And well, Close-to-Nature-Forestry holds several subjects and so many topics, so we'll most likely have no time to cover it all. So I will be very briefly. The organization asked us just to prepare 5 to 6 slides, so I have chosen just a few topics. And I also, as an introduction, I also would like to say and remind that well, Close-to-Nature-Forestry is one type of forest management. So among other, although it presents several advantages, but there are other forms of forest management. So generally speaking, Close-to-Nature-Forestry, let's say, has a long tradition in Europe since the end of 18th century, beginning of 19th century. But however, in some parts, it was replaced by plantation and regular forestry, considered at the time, but incorrectly, more productive. However, as it was shown no long after, it presents some drawbacks in terms of economics, ecological, and social. So Close-to-Nature-Forestry seeks to ensure and combine main 4 benefits and functions. So benefits for environment and people, the ones you see on the screen. So the conservation of biodiversity, protection of soil and forest microclimate, production of wood and non-wood goods, and then promotion of recreation, aesthetics, leisure, and cultural aspects. So this is very important, since besides a more, let's say, direct profit from wood production, it also incorporates simultaneously ecosystem services, including, of course, the carbon issues, and with no additional costs, or at least of concern, and therefore also contributing directly and indirectly to the economy. For example, There are some studies showing the benefits in terms of wood production, and for example, is a study where they compare also the management costs in terms of revenues and costs of management, and as you can see, they provide a higher profitability from timber production, but also as a general profit from management, comparing clear cutting system compared to close-to-nature-forestry. This is also related, well, as also relation to carbon. And here is also a comparative study showing that overall, considering above and underground carbon pool, there is a very considerable function regarding carbon sequestration. Those studies and activities have also been applied on Mediterranean context, for example, here with park oak and all two important forest types in the region. And well, and regarding Mediterranean, there are several issues, and I will just mention just a few. So the Euro-Mediterranean territory cover, or also a forest land covering roughly about 19 million hectares, and actually there are different biogeographical regions and climatic variations inside the Mediterranean, from thermal to meso or bioclimatic zones. So it presents a huge variation in terms of elevation, rainfall, temperature, geology, soil type, and even the dry period. So therefore, the forest types are very also widely. So that there isn't just one kind of Mediterranean forest. And the Mediterranean also highest biodiversity in Europe. However, and the landscape is typically patchy with mosaics of different land uses, vegetation types and structures, and which contributes to its high biological diversity. However, it also faces several threats, most of them related with human activity and pressure over the ecosystems, the landscape. Among other, this has to do with the change on land use, also forest type, and tree species, type of forest management that prevails or is predominant in most of the landscapes. And for example, it reflects on the lack of deadwood and large trees associated with some types of forest or forestry that has relation to biodiversity. Well, another important issue has to do with carbon, which is a major concern regarding the EU forest strategy, as well about the climate change adaptation and mitigation, which itself relates to several aspects. But well, the Mediterranean area faces a dry condition, and we know that drought has been an increased tendency over the last years. So this also relates with importance of preserving forest microclimate, and there are several studies showing that. So isn't forest cover important not only to preserve soil condition and fertility, but also the soil biological health, which in turn have also other effects on, for example, on tree regeneration, which is particularly difficult on harsh conditions, on degraded land and tree cover. And not to mention also the tree health problems and tree decline. Some aspects we have been observed these last years as a consequence of progressive soil degradation and, of course, the soil carbon loss. So focusing in some aspects onto paper, we found out that the situation regarding close-to-nature forestry or continuous cover forestry across the Mediterranean area ranges a little bit, which has to do with many factors. For example, clear felling still prevails as a major system in many countries, but it ranges across those countries, as you can see here. So couldn't we have, let's say, a more share on close-to-nature forestry and non-clear felling forestry in EU, which means a more balanced forest types across European Union and particularly on the Mediterranean region. And well, there are also issues, for example, related to other forest management types like copies, but I don't have right now time to go further into it, but we can discuss this later. And I like to, let's say, to end and finish my short presentation with some issues and needs regarding some policy, EU policy, as you can see on the screen. And I would like underline the last two ones. So the need for the payment of forest service, ecosystem services, and also provide, let's say, incentives to help forest owners to make the transformation from one system to other. So otherwise, it will be quite difficult. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Just to say, if that presentation, which was very interesting, I thought, triggers any thoughts or questions, please put them into the chat directly. And I'd like to now hand over to Yuri. Yuri, do you want me to share, or are you happy to share?
Okay, do you hear me?
We do.
I will try to share by myself.
Okay. Standing by. Looking good. You see your desktop right now, but no applications. So, okay, getting there. Perfect.
You see the application?
No, we see PowerPoint now. It's all good.
Because I don't see what I should see on the screen.
Okay, well, we can see your presentation perfectly.
So it's the first slide there.
Yes.
Okay, then I will start.
Great.
So thank you, dear ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. Thank you for invitation, and I will talk about definition, origins, and trends of close-to-nature forestry. And in the second part, I will tackle also management tools and uncertainties connected to this type of management. To make the definition simple, close-to-nature forestry comprises of variable silvicultural approaches, which are emulating natural processes. And we are focused on uneven age, structurally diverse, mixed forests. And this is opposite to, let's say, clear fellings, industrial forestry. Systems involved with close-to-nature forestry are selection system, irregular shelterwood, and freestyle silviculture. In Europe, we have to be proud of a rich history of close-to-nature forestry. which dates back to the Renaissance. We have Venetian forests, monastic forests, and farmer selection forests. In the paper, we did kind of inventory of this type of management within Europe. It's up to, let's say, 1/3 of forests managed, and the trend is increasing. Most of these forests are in temperate region, and also many are in Mediterranean region. But the share is very low in boreal region. Some states like Switzerland, Slovenia, regions of Italy, France, Germany have this approach written in their forestry law and have also kind of rich tradition, more than 100 years, while others introduced this approach relatively recently. In paper, we tackle also knowledge gaps, obstacles, and I believe one important result was that reliable data is missing. It was really difficult to get the data. And so this is one stress for the future, really to focus on the data on this type of forestry management. So you are invited to read the paper, which is also freely accessible. I'm hearing for some time, some years, that uneven age forestry doesn't make sense in boreal region, and I'm not so sure about this. Here are 3 examples. One is from Quebec, Saint-Véronique in Canada, then from Imö in Sweden, and also I would say the alpine forest below timberline are very similar to boreal ecosystems, and we have a lot of this type of forestry in the alpine countries. But I'm sure Sauli will talk about more these examples in his presentation. Few words about management tools. So basic is potential natural vegetation, good information about site ecology, but also knowledge about natural disturbance regimes is important. And this is perhaps issue that we have to put a little bit more forward within Pro Silva. We didn't discuss this, let's say, extensively within Pro Silva. We are using the silvicultural systems that we already stressed, but very important is that we are also using additional measures. And this means, for example, plant non-intervention. These are networks of forest reserves, old growth forests. And then we have also temporal or spatial limitation of management. Then we have also adapted management, where we have to, let's say, adapt to convert forest to more natural forest. And we have also special tending measures, for example, like focusing on biological legacies, coarse woody debris, trees outside forest, forest edges, and so on. But there are also uncertainties connected to close-to-nature-forestry, or this is some critique that Pro Silva should be open to this type of critique. One is that we are focused too much on the stand scale, that we are too much focused on single tree selection, and that we are neglecting biological legacies. Now I have to talk also a little bit about closer to nature forest management. This is new term introduced by the EU Forest Strategy 2030 and also biodiversity strategy. And there is a group of scientists working on this. I'm also involved with this group. And there are different opinions, which is good in a way. And we are trying to focus now. And for example, what I think at the moment of this closer to nature forest management is that this means improving existing management of forests that we have, for example, making smaller clear cuts, taking care for more biological legacies. Then we have to increase the share of uneven aged forests. And we have also to increase the share of strict protected areas in forests. let me summarize now. So Europe is a bit special. We have fine-grained settlement, matrix high population density, and we really need this traditional integrated approach because of economics of rural areas, for example, because of protection functions, because of recreation and so on. We have many enablers in Europe for this type of management. For example, we have to be proud of our tradition, more than 300 years of tradition. We have organizations like Pro Silva. We have many best practices. We have also developed forest management planning system, which is adaptive, often is also participatory. What is the way forward? We have to involve more forest owners, local managers, forest industry. So we need also bottom-up approach, like this session here. We have to discuss this at the round table. And then we have to solve the declining interest in Europe. Without forest management, we don't have possibility to adapt forests to climate change. So we have to increase the wood consumption in many countries of Europe, and we have to replace unsustainable energy and materials with wood. So we really have to focus into carbon neutrality. And then we need coordinated forest policy. I believe it's not possible to maximize biodiversity, to maximize economical input from green economy, to maximize carbon sequestration, to maximize protection. What we need is optimization. And I'm happy to be involved in an EU-funded project about optimization. So we are discussing this issue. This is the One Forest project. Then Pro Silva should continue discussion about improvement of close-to-nature-forestry and use scientific tools, use papers. And at the moment, there is an open issue of journal Forests about ecological forestry, and you are invited to contribute papers to this open issue. And I will conclude with the sentence that Pro Silva can make an important contribution to conservation of Europe's forest, but volunteering is not enough. I believe we are at the moment where we really need to upgrade our work with projects. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Yuri, and thanks for sharing. So we want to hand it over to Sauli now. And I'm not sure if you want me to share yours or you can share yourself.
Thanks. I think I'll try to share myself first.
Brilliant. Okay. See how it goes. I'm here just in case.
Yes.
Just to mention while it's getting set up is that we'd love to see your question. One question has come in. See your questions coming into the chat window. And I'm in duplicate here. So please, and I'll gather them all up so we can have a good conversation at the end.
All right. Are you seeing my PowerPoint now?
Yes, we can see it. Work away.
All right. Thanks. My contribution is not only a status report. I think I have a proposition to make, and it goes some way along the lines of the concepts and terms work here now. There's a very a strong debate going on about the future of our forest in Finland and Sweden. It's all about predominant clear-cutting forestry or the plantation type silviculture, and of course CCF as an alternative to it. But the pressures are really mounting, as you can see from the headlines here. To begin with, important fact, continuous cover forestry was banned by law in Finland. not mandated by law, as Yuri already mentioned, for some countries, but it was banned. The ban was lifted only about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Oh no, it's already more, 8 years ago. And the purpose was to boost the wood reserves as a foundation for the expansion of industries. And it's no wonder that Finland and Sweden are flashing red and orange on this map. But this is not the whole picture. I think the figures have already changed a little bit since this data was gathered. And also there is some other signs of change in the air. Like here, in a recent survey, about more than 50% of non-corporate private landowners stated that they are already using uneven age management or continuous cover forestry in part or all of their forests. And that's a huge leap from practically zero from 2014, I should say. Also, the state forest management, Metsähallitus, has increased the share of continuous cover markedly. Last year, I think it was the decision was made. So we are moving forward very fast, I think. But there are obstacles, of course, to wider adoption. And can we say that it's landowner reluctance? No, not really, only partly. Like the survey results showed that many people are interested in and rapidly adopting it. Of course, some are reluctant. They, or let's say we, as I am a forest owner too, for decades we have been educated in the benefits of plantation type silviculture and the adversities of continuous cover forestry. So is it reluctance of the forestry professionals and organizations that are educating us and executing the plantation type silviculture and other forms? Well, that's more to the point, but not really the main thing, which is the systemic reluctance. It's in our economic and political structures. And the main point here is that timber production in our forests supports a very large and important industrial sector. And the promotion of growth, yield and harvesting with the intensified management since the 1950s, it really is a success story. Like the forest productivity in terms of annual growth and yield, it's almost double to what it was in the 50s. So it has worked fine in that respect. But the plantation type forest management is a success story only in terms of wood yields, but not without detriment to other uses and users and ecosystem services. Like here are some examples: ugly clear cuts, water-caused pollution. The intensive treatments are really expensive and the costs are carried by landowners. All the planting and tending after clear cutting. Then we have made species and habitats endangered. Just one figure here, some 80% of forest habitat types are endangered, and several hundred species. Of course, remedies have been attempted in the clear-cut forestry context, but as you can see that such small areas and small number of trees in structural retention. They are not working very well, and their contribution and impact are showing to be quite minimal, I would say. You can understand that 1% of the area and a few trees per hectare is not much. So the alternative, of course, is the CCF approach, whereby diversity and resilience in forest ecosystems are really based on structural and dynamic variability. And here we come to the disturbance dynamics principle, and it supports the traditional retention approach at the stand level, but also we have experiments and large-scale trials for the landscape level phenomena, which I think is equally important. But then again, this is not enough. It does not really address the most crucial thing, and this is, we are coming to the main point of my presentation or my message, that only complex adaptive ecosystems can guarantee the resilience in the situation where the temperatures are rising and other effects from the climate changing are showing. And here again, the problems are really mounting really fast in terms of damages and disease in our forests. So what we need for the future, and what I'm suggesting here for Pro Silva and everybody here, at least I can only talk for our own area, but maybe there are some points of agreement for others, that to emphasize the role of complex, the importance of having complex adaptive ecosystems and trying to restore them for the future is extremely important and key in this situation. And I can say that we are very late already. Here is the summary that I have presented, and let's not repeat this, repeat it once again. But my take-home message here is at the bottom line. I think in terms of the proportion, importance, whatever regarding CCF at the moment right now, is that climate changing is turning the tables, despite all the systemic reluctance in our society and forests. And we must work for resilience, or else it's going to look ugly. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks so much, Solly.
Thank you.
We move on to Thomas now, and we are seeing some questions come in. That's great. Please carry on with the questions, and we'll compile them for the end of the presentations. So, Thomas, are you happy to share your own screen? I see that you're off mute, so we should be able to hear you fine. Hello, Thomas? Thomas? Should we go on to Bill Eckhart, and maybe Thomas can present?
Yes, maybe we switch because we need.
Yes, let's keep going. So maybe Bill, if you wouldn't mind jumping in at this point. Oh, you're on the ball. Great, thank you.
Mark, can you hear me?
We can.
And have you got full screen?
No, you're still in the kind of editing mode. So,
All right. Right, Anna, to save hassles, why don't you take control?
I shall do that. Yes. Share screen. PowerPoint. Give me a second here. Whoops. No, that's not showing. Okay, let's go. Share screen. PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay. That okay for everybody? And can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks to Pro Silva for setting up this event. I've been asked to talk a little bit about issues to do with terminology relating to continuous cover forestry in British forestry. Next screen, start with Anna, please. First click. Okay, the Continuous Cover Forestry Group was founded in 1991 following our founders' involvement with the original Pro Silva meetings. Next, please. Now, if you go on the Pro Silva website, one of the things that might strike you, if you look at the member organizations, that you have Pro Silva Country A, Pro Silva Country B. And right at the end, you come to something else with the Union Jack, which calls itself the Continuous Cover Forestry Group. And this wasn't anything to do with Brexit, I should add. But it relates to discussions that took place at the founding meeting in 1991. And there was a concern, I wasn't present at the original meeting, but talking to people who were there was concern about the participants that close to nature sounded more like a religion than a forest management approach based on science. And there was also a concern that in Britain, our forests, particularly our productive forests, are dominated by introduced species. Next, please, Anna. It was felt, and there was a lengthy discussion in a pub in late March in '91, which produced the term continuous cover. And it was felt that continuous cover provided a technical description of a desired forest structure that was different to the widespread approach to forest management in Britain, which were even age stands, mostly single species, managed by clear felling. Next, please, Anna. And it felt that this term continuous cover involved some of the normative aspects of a term such as close to nature. And those of you who've looked at Kevin O'Hara's 2016 paper on what is close to nature in an era of climate change that was published in Forestry will appreciate some of the issues. And next, please. And continuous cover and continuous cover forestry in CCF has really stood the test of time in British forestry, to the extent that although we've discussed as a committee and as a group in Britain whether we should become Pro Silva GB or UK, we've actually felt that continuous cover describes what our group is about and our aspirations. But that's not to say that there aren't problems. Next slide, please. And again. And this, the problems come from a parallel exercise to do with the certification process that came into Britain in the late 1990s, which introduced a term which we know as LIS, which stands for Lower Impact Silvicultural Systems. Next, please. Now, LIS is defined in the certification documentation as containing a range of silvicultural and other approaches, including CCF, coppice management, non-intervention, small-scale patch clear felling, and others. Pretty well everything other than clear felling. Next, please. The problem that we faced is, and there are others on this call who know this at least as well as me, is that foresters in Britain have started to use CCF and LIS as synonyms, and patch clear felling on some scale can be argued to be seen as CCF compatible. Next. We, that's now the CCF group, have been arguing during the revisions of the certification standard that LIS, i.e. the lower impact component of this term, should refer to management intensity and not to silvicultural systems. Next. It's unclear at this stage to what extent we're going to succeed in achieving the desired revision of the certification standard. And next slide, please, Anna. So, if I can draw some lessons for the wider community from this rather parochial British discussion, particularly in terms of a new forest strategy being introduced into Europe, which talks about closer-to-nature-forestry. The first lesson I would say is that the terms and definitions that are adopted for Pro Silva and other newer approaches, more sensible approaches to forestry, these terms and definitions matter. And the second point
in this moment, I restart the computer.
Is that it's very important that one is consistent in the use of terms, especially over time. I think it's at a time of change, and both Sauli, Yuri, and Joao have already explained why the introduction of more sensitive approaches to forest management are important. Increasing resilience because of the increasing damages to forests. It's very important that we're consistent over time because we're trying to encourage managers and owners to change approaches. And if we're confused about the terms we use, then they will be. And lastly, a third term that a comment I would have made, whatever terms and definitions are adopted, it's very important that they allow for regional variation in forest types, both within a country and across the continent. So with that, thanks very much. And thank you, Anna.
Not at all. Thanks, Bill. So, Thomas, I think he's come back now at this point. Let me just stop sharing here. I had to mute him. So, Thomas, are you ready to go here?
Yeah, in this moment, do you hear me, Anna?
Yeah? I do hear you. And are you happy to share yourself?
Okay, it was the technical problem on my computer. Yeah.
That happens. We've had very few, luckily. So touch wood, we won't have any more.
Okay,
and we need to make you a co-host here now. Sorry about that. So there you are, your co-host now. So you should be able to share, no problem.
I hope.
Or I can share if it's better.
Yeah.
Okay, looking good.
Yeah.
Well, we can, yes, good. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So I would like very shortly present some information. What is the close-to-nature-forestry in the case of our big forestry catastrophe in Central Europe? There's a picture which you see on the first slide. This is a typical view in the Central European landscape, especially in the Czech Republic, where the roots of the even-aged silviculture, we call it the Saxony school of even-aged forestry, is a very long time and very traditionally used. And if you see the map of the Czech Republic, these red regions are affected by spruce or Scots pine catastrophe. It means this large-scale death of forest stands, as you have seen on the first picture. This is a very big problem for us, but the question is, what are the cases of this situation and what to do if we would like to practice some close-to-nature forestry principles. But it is necessary to say this catastrophe is the synergy of more causes, but the three main important causes are at first the nutrition depth in the soils, because after the 2 or 3 generations of the spruce, even H monocultures, the soils are very strongly acid, that they are acid soils without the nutritions. And the second cause is the long-term use of inconvenient silviculture system, because the spruce and Scots pine monocultures were planted using the thinnings from below. The trees had very short crowns, very low mechanical stability, etc. And in this situation came the climate change with very long drought periods. Like, for example, in 2019, 6 weeks without the rainfall during the summer. It was absolutely critical for the surviving of these forest stands, and the situation is as you have seen on the first picture. So if we use the definitions or the typical attributes for close-to-nature forestry, which were defined, for example, in the paper from Jürgen Bauhaus in 2013, these attributes is not possible to find on our large-scale clear-cut stands, because many forest owners started again on the absolutely clean plot. So we can't discuss about some site adapted species composition, because we have to find the species composition which will be site adapted. We can't discuss about the avoidance of clear felling, because everything is clear felled. We can't discuss about the stability, but for us is the question how we can use in the higher portion the natural processes for the regeneration of this large-scale stands or clear cuts, and how to use the natural processes in the creating of new tree species composition on these plots. And some forest owners in our country who are managing the forests using the close-to-nature forestry principles now discuss about this three attributes. How is the new tree species composition? What will be the new spatial mixture of the trees, and how will be the future spatial structure of this new young forests? And if you see, this is an example from our forest enterprise where we use these natural processes in higher ratio. This is a typical clear cut after windstorm, and it was not reforested, and after 10 years it's coming the new birch stand in which the birches are selected to support the future high quality stems. And second step is to underplant the tree species which we would like to mix or admixed, like the understory of this birches. And in this moment, this microclimatic condition is good for the planting, for example, the silver fir and beech and other tree species. And next steps are now in the progress of testing. Like you can see on the left picture, it is the combination of secondary succession of pioneer tree species with the sowing of the seeds in the belts. I mean the seeds of Scots pine, larch, and other tree species, which we combine with this broad-leaved pioneer tree species for the creating the new tree species composition and new spatial structure of this young forest stands. And on the right picture, you can see how is it possible to create the new spatial order, because if somebody is owner, for example, of 500 hectares of the forest and 300 hectares are absolutely dead, it is the problem how to create the spatial order for the future. And this is an example from our enterprise. These yellow belts are the belts with this combining regeneration, secondary succession plus sowing in belts or plus planting of some special tree species. And these belts between these yellows, they are the belts on which the dead trees are standing and create the better microclimate, and the secondary succession under these belts of standing dead trees is not reduced. It means in the new spatial order we will have the by man actually created tree species composition and the belts with the naturally successive species composition. And it is next experiment how to restore this forest stands after this large-scale catastrophe. So the last regulation for us is if we restore these new forests, the maximal area for the replanting of one tree species is 0.20 hectare. It is the spatial limit for the creation of the new mixed forests. So this is a very short introduction in the main problem of the Central European forests and for our thinking about the use of close-to-nature-forestry principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. That's great. So I guess we're on to the part of the discussion part of the afternoon. There are some comments and questions coming in. I can start with those unless people want to turn their mics on and make any comments. So I can start with some of the questions we've had. We had one, which was, where is the R today? I think this is in the closer to nature. The EU forest strategy talks about the term closer to nature forestry, forest management. The same or different from close to nature, I think is a question. Anybody like to take that from our panelists? So what's the difference between closer to nature and close to nature? So Yuri, I think maybe would be a good person for that.
Yeah, thank you. I tackled this already a little bit, and since this is still work in progress, I would not want to speak too much about the final outcome. We have to wait for the final outcome, which will be, I guess, presented on the 1st of March to the Commission, DG Environment, I believe. And what is my opinion about closer to nature is that in a way, this is really a broader term. If you look at the different geographical conditions, social conditions in Europe, also forests that were damaged by disturbances. So we have really very, very different starting points. And the idea is to push everything towards a little bit more towards nature. So I believe that closer will not mean total prohibition of clear cuts, but perhaps the idea to find solution to make clear cuts a bit smaller, to perhaps also extend a little bit the production cycle where is possible, where the high trees are not, let's say, problematic because of winds and so on. So it's kind of really a broad term, and important part of closer to nature management, I believe, is also uneven age management, continuous cover, or close to nature management. But again, this closer to nature management was invented by European Union. It's relatively new. It's mentioned in these strategies, and it's in a way in developing, and also we can contribute to the final result with our discussion and comments and so on. So thank you.
Great, thank you. There's a comment here from Renzo to say, I think that Thomas' presentation has offered a good example between the difference of close to nature approach and closer to nature approach, depending on the starting point. Would you guys agree with that? Eckhart, did you want to jump in there?
Yes, we saw these 5 presentations, and the idea was to show the broad spectrum that we could cover. That's very important, that we not restrict to Central European Planterwald stories, and also not to religion. We use principles on a wide range of scale, and we have to cover all these points from the Mediterranean to the Boreal region. And I think some people have a little fear about it, so that this may be a restriction of your management opportunities, but I think we should have it open as much as it's possible without losing our guidelines. But it should be open up as much as is possible, because the best solutions are produced or developed by the foresters regarding according to the site conditions, to the former forest. What is the story of the soil? What is the story of the forest, as Thomas mentioned? So therefore we should use the principles and our toolbox, but we should be quite open how it's in the details. So I invite you all to bring in some contributions, and also our special guests, if you like to take the floor, please raise your hand or come in. Thank you.
Okay.
Christine Sanchez.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that the Closer to Nature was actually created by DG Environment, and is a very recent term, and has been, I think, has been invented to take into account many different visions of close to nature forestry. And for the moment, there's no agreement on the co-leads of the guidelines that are being created on closer to nature forestry. There's no agreement on the definition of what is closer to nature, so it's still being discussed. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. So can I just bring us back then to, should we move on from the closer to nature, or do we want to spend a bit more time talking about that at this point? Because there was an interesting question about education, which might have some relevance here. Maybe I'll bring us back to that, and then we can come back to closer to nature if we need to. So Sean had a question about, he said, while tradition can make a great contribution, is there not a great need for transformation in education at all levels? Should there be a specific educational strategy? And I'm assuming that's in relation to foresters and how they're trained. Maybe Eckhart would like to chime in. I'm not sure who might be the right person to answer that.
No, I just want to mention what Marco wrote in the chat. That's very important. I think that closer to nature forestry is a decision by the European Commission and not a creation of the DG environment. And this is more or less a public relation term than a scientific term. So we should use it in the right sense. It should move us in the right direction or help us to move in the right direction. Sean from Pro Silva Ireland.
Yeah, hello. I just want to elaborate a little bit on my question.
Great.
The word tradition was used as one of the, if you like, one of the foundations in Europe, and so it is. So there is a tradition in certain parts of Europe. But if I take Ireland, I don't think we have a tradition in close to nature forestry. And just listening to the debate already, you know, even that very recent one about close and closer, all these terms, in my opinion, are very loaded for both for the industry and for the lay person. So they're quite complex, and they're very. I mean, it's a great debate, so to speak. But they kind of hide the processes and principles about all the subtle differences of different management approaches. And what's very obvious to me is that we're going, certainly in Ireland, from a simple approach to forestry to a complex approach to forestry. It's much more involved in complex decision making. And I think one of the slides earlier on talked about integrated management. So you're looking at the ecological, the economic, and the social impacts. And in order to deal with those, we need a very different debate and animal, both, I would argue, at a leadership, at a political level, at a forest owner level, at an industrial level, you know, the current forest industry, so to speak. And this demands a knowledge of biodiversity, of trees, of all these impacts that we're talking about, that you're all talking about. And even all of that doesn't take into consideration what I might call the craft that's involved, when the individuals have to go out and choose trees and be trained in the selection and be trained in the choices. And I noticed in the debate so far, agriculture and farmers weren't really mentioned at all. So there's a huge gap, I think, in the whole education of farmers. Certainly in Ireland, it's all I know about these very complex issues. And I suppose that's the context for my question. So the question is, I think there's a need for a total transformation of education around all these concepts that you're talking about, that Pro Silva talks about. And I'm just wondering, is that coming together, or should Pro Silva Europe be pushing the Commission? Maybe there is something going on I'm not aware of. I'd love to know what the current status is from the panel.
Great, thank you.
Bill raises his hands.
Yeah, if I can just sort of comment on the last question. I think one of the things that it's important to recognize is that the introduction of CCF, closer to nature approaches, is a journey. And it's not something that is a quick fix. And I think that's, speaking from a British perspective, that was why our founders were right to avoid the issue of getting into discussions as to what was more or less natural in forest management. Because one needs instead to have a vision, or to try and develop a vision of what the forest should look like, or a forest should look like in the future, compared to what it looks like today, and then start the forest on a journey towards it. And that requires all the kind of skills that Sean was talking about. But I think it's very important to recognize, as Thomas's slides from the Czech Republic showed, is that these things take time to achieve. and we have to be patient. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Okay. There are some other questions that have come in. Some of them are just comments, like climate change is turning the tables from Philippe. I suppose the complexity that you're all talking about is, I mean, it's a fundamental part of recognizing the complexity in natural systems. So we have to be cognizant of that. Okay, there's Thomas Hausman was wondering to learn if there's more studies available that forest management according to Pro Silva principles are more resilient to the climate change compared to traditional managed forests in terms of damaged trees and ecosystem functions. And do you have experience how to measure those effects? It's a good question. Anybody would venture an answer? And we have a, Heinrich, your hand is up, but not for a different question, I believe, rather than a comment, is it?
Yes, comment. For a comment.
Okay, well, go ahead and make your comment.
Hello, from Germany. I think it's very important because it's a key thing in close-to-nature-forestry that we have nature regeneration. And nature regeneration makes it possible to be very flexible in the forest. And I'm working for 30 years in northern Germany, and there's a big problem that the hunting laws are not so that we can make nature regeneration everywhere. And I think we have to support law in Europe to organize that nature regeneration for native trees must be offense. And then there's a second point. I think I agree when Jury says that we need money for the forest. But in Germany, we always have the situation that there's a storm like tonight, and then the forest owner, he can get money for fences and for new tree planting. And in fact, it is that some of the forests are not managed for stability and resilience. And so the costs from this more industrial forest is paid by the social society, and the benefit goes only to the private foresters. So I think it must be very important that we have a picture from our forest, and this picture of the forest should be get some money, some subsidies, so that we have a successful forestry earns also some subsidies, but not that we spend the money to repair the forest. Then when we change this systems of subsidies, we have the possibility that we motivate forest owners to make a forest like close-to-nature-forestry. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Heinrich. We have Liam has his hand up, but there are all questions coming in the chat as well. Maybe we'll go to Liam and then come back to the chat.
Thank you, Anna, and just like to thank Yuri and his team for this afternoon. It's fantastic. Totally agree, particularly coming from Ireland. We have a lot of new forest culture, new forest professionals, and we're starting from a very low base about the need for education. But and then Bill talks about many of us have had the luxury of learning skills over a 20-25 year period, growing in sync with the forest, observing, developing and honing our skills. And that's really a luxury. But I think what's happening is forest policy and climate change is moving at a much more rapid rate and putting great demands, just as Sean has outlined, on this organization. And I think Yuri in his presentation alluded to it as well. Many of us here, while we work professionally within education or within industry, many of us is here as well-meaning volunteers who passionately believe in it. But the demands to develop education, to develop policy is put on us as volunteer committee members is great. And I think that's a challenge for us. And public policy has, CCF Pro Silva message, the Pro Silva principles are very much involved with public policy now. But this is putting massive strain on our organization as well, while we're all passionately in love doing it. So I think that's a challenge for us.
Okay, thanks, Liam. A question here from Giorgio, which looks pretty interesting. And if Giorgio wants to speak rather than me reading it out, that might be good. But one relevant issue to be confronted with is related to the wood extracted at larger scale. Will CTNF target the same or a lower amount of wood extracted? Then the issue is, are we using too much wood in our industrial systems? If not, then a lower amount of wood extracted in Europe would mean an increase in imports, maybe from areas of the world with much lower control of silvicultural system and sustainable management. And then goes on to say it's a multifaceted issue. Anybody care to speak to that? So I guess the issue is, you know, if we pull out less wood, do we have to import it then if we're, you know, the system needs the wood?
I don't think that we decrease the timber volume that we are able to harvest. I think if the forest structure is really good in a good status and developed very well, then it's more productive. And from the point of economical perspective, if we just harvest large diameter trees, the costs are much lower from the cutting to the road, from the road to the sawmill, and so on. So we have also some economical advantages that we can take with us as a plus if we change something. Selective forestry, of course, some topics maybe some costs may be higher, but we need to have this integrated management, but not reduce the timber. I think also on the European forest strategy, that the use of timber, the timber utilization, and the new Bauhaus, etc., are a very, very important pillar of the whole strategy. But no one is talking about that chapter. All are talking about 30% set aside forest, but that's not true. So we have to find a balance between timber utilization and nature protection, and of course also carbon storage and carbon sequestration. So we have to find an optimal solution for different goals, and of course the relation of these different goals differ from country to country and from site to site also.
Okay. There was an interesting question through the Thomas presentation about from Alexander Held. Can I assume natural selection, natural processes, tree species composition, natural regeneration only works behind a deer fence? So that's a little bit different than what we've been talking about, but is it worth discussing deer in general and how we can live in harmony with the animals and at the same time the trees can still grow?
So it's a true for this regeneration of large areas after the catastrophe is necessary to operate the wild game, especially to shoot the wild game very intensively. It is necessary to make the wider belts, for example, 6-8 meters wide and long, which are very good for the hunting the wild games, because in this young regenerated forest is absolutely not possible to hunt. So only on these belts, and if you have the good system of crossing belts, you can control the wild game. The wild game stand, yeah, and if we use some more important, more rare species, which should bring us the high quality and high production, high quality stems for the future. In many regions, it is necessary to fence it because the stand of wild game is higher than higher than optimal, if I can use this diplomatic term. Yeah, of course, shooting, hunting is absolutely necessary tool for the planting the new mixed and stable forests. It's simple.
Fair enough. Thank you. So I think at this point we're 5 minutes to the end, and I think we had hoped to get a 1 minute summary from each of the presenters. So maybe do you want to start, Toma, just since you're already in the spotlight?
I propose that we can just have maybe 10 minutes more, because the presentations took far more time than we planned. So I don't want to cut the discussion now. So if please bring yourself in and raise your hand. We want to show all our different opinions or different questions or answers also. Thank you. Joao, please.
Well, I have like just to make a final statement. So and underline the important to.
So then take the final message and wait a little bit, and then we.
Okay.
So there was a comment from Ted about setting up some working groups to address the issues raised on the call. For example, how we relate to wider policy issues, training and education, scientific advisory roles to maintain the Pro Silva principles as a basis for our ecosystems, resilience. Wow, it's a long sentence, Ted. And multifunctional forest management. This is important. It's important we maintain a position in the mainstream of forestry debate at the European level. So I suppose that's an interesting one. How do we have an influence beyond this group?
I think, as far as I know, many of our colleagues are already, or some are already involved in some working groups. For example, in the working group Forest and Nature at the DG Environment and others. And the idea of this meeting now, this meeting was just to show that to have a kind of alliance between each other, and so that we. Of course, that there would be a need for different working groups, but this is, in the moment, I don't know how I could manage this, because it would be a full job to manage all these things. That's a pity. So we had much work to set up this conference now, this webinar. But of course, we should take this proposal and try to find a kind of semi-professional solution. Christine Sanchez is also involved in one group, and Yuri and Joao, etc. So, but the right structure would be, of course, to have professional working groups. But in the moment, I don't see how we could manage this. So please bring in different questions or remarks for this discussion.
So Ted would like us to talk about education and training.
Yeah, that's an important thing. I think it's also written in there's a reference in the forest strategy that goes exactly to that. And I think this is in fact one of the main role that Pro Silva can play as a multiplier in the forest, not in the office, in the forest, to teach people, to train them, etc. But there's one very important point, that we must have enough money in forestry to pay people to select the trees. If you don't have those who are educated and go in the forest to select and mark the right trees for the next step in the work, then, and we let this task go to the machine driver, then it's not possible to go further in our direction, I think. Thomas Wuschka raised his hand.
Thanks, Eki. This is only my short comment to your last idea. I think there's a discussion if some silvicultural model is close to nature or closer to nature. They are only the academic discussions, because if you come into the practice, the people who are interested in this close to nature principles ask you please tell me how to make the dots on the trees under the principles of close-to-nature forestry. And this is, from my point of view, the largest gap in this wider using and wider application of close-to-nature principles. And I commented this European Strategy 2030. If you read it, it is 25 sites, and this is in this strategy is many paragraphs about the necessity of the new monitoring systems, about the necessity of some new parameters for the evaluation of deadwood presence and in forest, etc. But only very, very short paragraph about the changing of practical knowledges between the foresters. But I think this is the absolutely main point for the wider using of close-to-nature forestry, to establish some network of the people who has the practical experiences and who can train the other people who are interested. This training in the forest, I mean the training in the making the dots on the trees is a crucial point from my point of view, because when I make the dots on the trees, I have to ask every time, is this my style of making the dots, of are my steps closer to nature than in standard even aged forestry? And from my point of view, definitely main point. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So there's an interesting follow-up comment from Per Angelstam. Yes, and if I may, based on learning through evaluation about results on the ground of different approaches and the portfolios, the benefits they result in. So I think that's to follow up on what you were saying, Thomas, I think.
I think that's one technical technical approach is the use of mud telescopes and the results. That's one, but it's not the only one. We have to use different training techniques, but the three-dimensional picture in the real forest is much more than a graphic in a book. So I think that's our chance to multiply. And as maybe I forgot to say it in my introduction, we have more than 5,500 individual members in Pro Silva organizations all over Europe, and we have far more interested people. So we should spread this practical knowledge in the forest to the younger people. That's our main issue, I think.
Okay. So there's a question here. I'm very curious, what is the reference for the optimal structure of the forest? A telescope or virgin forests? Is that even possible to answer, I suppose?
There's one hand, I think, from...
Oh, yes, Gabriel.
Hello, I'm Gabriel Duman from Romania. I believe that the entire discussion goes in the end to the money. And another important role of Pro Silva refers maybe to require more money from European Commission, not only for education, but in order to promote close-to-nature forestry, also for infrastructure, because there are many differences between countries or regions in Europe where especially forest road density is quite low. And we all know that to promote close-to-nature forestry, we need a high level of forest road density. It's just an example with the forest road density. But we have to invest a lot of money in infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a comment here from Sylvia to say that the Forest Europe Secretariat in Bonn is working on forest education and green jobs as one of our work streams. They want to investigate challenges and needs at pan-European levels, so you can access more info on our working plan. And there's a link there to get in touch for more info. So I suppose there's been a few links actually supplied here today. It might be worth, Eckhart, giving them to people afterwards. We'll have that recorded in the chat.
Yes.
Might be worth sharing that at the end.
We will try to make a kind of summary and share the links and also the presentations if the authors agree with it. Georg Frank raised his hand, please.
So thank you. One important tool could be our network of the explanatory forests. In almost most of the countries, Pro Silva has these networks, and I think we should use it in the combination with what Thomas Ruschka said. And I also think this is very important because this, let's say, traditional knowledge of the right, not only marking, but all the right of the selecting trees in a close-to-nature-forestry is getting lost more and more. And therefore, I think it's in terms of education, Pro Silva has this network of the explanatory forests of our own members. And I think we should really focus on this, to extend this network and to use this network also, maybe in combination with scientific work also. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a comment here from Paula. Skilled closer to nature foresters to need to be provided with deep roots in forest ecology, particularly forest ecosystem functioning and ecological processes. That, I suppose, speaks to the type of education they should be getting. Anybody else like to make a comment at this point?
Marco Nida is about to leave us. Maybe he wants to say a few words, just a short words before he's off, because it's an honor that he participated. Already gone?
Oh, that was unexpected. I have colleagues. My colleague Stephanie Schmidt is following, and she's the one dealing with the close to nature. So yeah. I can only repeat what I said. For me, this is bringing this aspect into close to nature and the closer to nature that we need. That shows that it's happening, that it can happen. So I think this is a very, very, very important exchange. I won't take more time in this. Maybe if my colleague Stephanie wants to say something, I leave it to her. But for me, it's really, really a big thank to you, Eckhart, and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco, because now people could see your face also, the face behind the papers, maybe. But we need too much. We need good discussions in the future also, and it's not everything is. As we saw and discussed, that we have to discuss some definitions, and also some thresholds and so on. So it's not ready. It's a working process, and we want to contribute as good as we can to that process. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have maybe 3 questions or 3 remarks, and then we can come to the final statements. No one? So if no one wants, Robert Mauser, yes, please. Let's just also switch on. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. So I was really enjoying this discussion and the presentations. As you said, I'm coming myself from a country with a long history in close to nature forest management. Professor Mlinšek was my silviculture professor when I was studying. I think that we are dealing here with a very complex issue, how to make sure that the forest will be fit and also provide all the good services and benefits that we are expecting from them, but also being resilient and adapted to the challenges that climate change is presenting. So I believe that this type of discussions, exchange of knowledge, relying on scientific evidence in particular, are very important when developing or defining certain approaches. And so I hope that this is not going to be the only such event before the guidelines are published or before such a definition will be published, and that we can count on this collaboration also in the near and the little bit not so near future. So thank you very much for organizing this, and allowing us to be here.
Thank you for
And by the way, also some of the colleagues already mentioned, there is currently also an activity ongoing that EFI is supporting on basically looking on the scientific evidence that would support the establishment of a closer to nature forest management. And I believe that that will also be presented rather soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for participating and bringing our message to your institute. And of course, we had some collaboration in the past years. I participated in most of the integrate meetings in Poland, Czech Republic, and Denmark. So therefore, these contexts are very important. The direct context, the talks in the forest, discussions in the forest, and then we can find trust between each other. That's also important. I think we hand over to Andreas Ammann, who raised his hands. He's a colleague from western part of Austria. He's one of my vice presidents for Silva Austria, but he's also the forest director of the province, and he is successful to develop a forest strategy for Vorarlberg, and this will be published in a few months, I think. But this is an interesting approach on the low scale level in the European context. Andreas, please.
Yes, thank you for this invitation. Thank you also for this good discussion and the very interesting contributions of all the countries. For me, the most important stakeholder in all these things is the forest owner. And I think if we want to have a change toward close to nature forestry, we should at first have respect to respect the owner. We should let him space to be creative and to make his own decisions. And we should save his energy and take care for it, that he saves his energy for working in the forest and not for monitoring and more monitoring and things like that. And whenever one of you has influence in making the rules and the guidelines, please take care for the respect of the forest owner. They are no children of 3 or 4 years that need to be said what they have to do and what they should not have to do, and to ask for every step they make. And what the development we see in the European Commission, where many people sit together, discuss, people that have never worked in the forest, never have had responsibility to nourish a family or a company or whatever, we should remind them that the work has to be done from the owners, and the owner has to be motivated and not educated. Thank you.
Great point. As a forest owner, I appreciate that.
Yes.
There's a comment here from Peter. Old growth forest criteria and indicator and threshold systems are being developed within the EU.
I think he can put it in a few words so we don't read the chat. Peter Chepanik from Hungary.
Okay.
Please just give your remark very short.
Hello, everybody. Can I hear me? I just like to raise your attention of this procedure. This primarily and old growth forest criteria and indicators and threshold systems are being developed within the EU, and this will be affect not the domestic and natural conditions, but also the long-term forest aspect too. And I am the view that inadequate settings of old growth forest indicators will have a negative impact of currently intensifying process of transferring more and more even-aged age-class forest to continuous cover forestry. So there is a real danger as a result of this process. Forests managed by continuous cover forestry will be partially classified as old growth forest. And sustainable forestry in these areas maybe will become impossible. So this will deter foresters from transferring their forest to CCF management. We have some area where the continuous cover forest management started 60, 70 years ago, and these forests may also show similar parameters as old growth forest. That means deadwood amount, large trees, stand origin, vertical structure, habitat trees, and age-class diversity. So I'd like to raise the attention that this topic is very important, and Pro Silva Europe must also pay attention to this process and give its voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I know this, and this is really important that our managed forests are not treated as old growth forests and put out of management. So that's important. But I think that the European Commission and the people that are working there know this already, and because they want to motivate us to go in that direction and not cut the last old trees before they have another regime and they put under some protection. Yeah, I think it's really, we opened up so many topics in the discussion, and I think we should finish this. But this encourages us, because we have such a great interest from people all over Europe, that we can maybe continue with a more specified discussion topic. Maybe not so many people, but with a better structures of the working plan, as it was proposed before in the remarks. So, but we will have to think about that. So I think it's time for the finish. Anne, will you please raise give the word to the 5 speakers? I think
yes.
Thomas Ruska already left, so we have 4.
Okay, so will we start with João? João?
Okay, good. So I just like to make 2 remarks. About the importance regarding education or motivation to forest owners, because many times the forest owners are not aware about the benefits of this kind of forest management. So that would be very important. And another is to underline also the need for financial support from EU policy to help owners for forest transformation. For example, suppose that a forest owner has a plantation and he wants to implement close-to-nature-forestry. So he will need a period of transformation, and to make this possible, it's very important to have European financial support to help this transformation. So it is important to remark this need into next European policy, to help these owners that want to do this, help them to do this transformation.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much. Yuri, we might go to you next.
Thank you. So forests are undoubtedly under real stress, and this goes also for forests that are managed in a close to nature way. So this means that we have really to further develop close to nature forestry. And for this, we need to be open to criticism, to listen to what are the ideas of other stakeholders. And I believe we have to invite them more and more to, let's say, sessions like this, and also to our laboratories in forests. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thank you very much. Sally, you're next if you are ready to go.
Thank you. Yeah, well, this meeting further emphasizes to me that Europe is a very complex system itself, and it's hard and not even necessary to reach consensus on everything, not even the terminology, but maybe we can recognize that forests are, at least I would like to emphasize this, that forests are ecosystems and their sustainability can only be restored in this situation only if recognized and treated as such in the future. And put it more straightforwardly, I would say that the command and execute approach of today that prevails in many countries, many areas, still it may not be working much longer.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think we've lost Thomas, so maybe Bill, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, when listening, thanks firstly to everybody for their contributions for a very interesting afternoon discussion. And I've got two comments I think I'd like to make. One is something I picked up from the comments Sauli made to me over 20 years ago. And he was talking about forests in Britain, in Scotland. And he said to me quietly, after listening to one of our forestry high-ups talking, he said, I hear that the forestry policies have changed in the last 15 to 20 years. But when I look at them, the forests still look the same. And I think that ties into the comment that Yuri made, that one of the difficulties we had when pulling together the paper that was published in Forestry last year is how difficult it was to get data on the way forests were managed in Europe. And I think we need to be pressing regional, national, continental organizations to assemble better data sets on the way European forests are managed. Because if we don't have that basic understanding of the way forests are being managed at the present time, we will have very little idea of whether it's feasible for these forests to be adapted to climate change, provision of ecosystem services, or whatever. So we need better data sources, I think, to support the work of Pro Silva. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think we went through all the speakers.
We did.
Yeah. So I think we can finish this session. I just went through the chat contributions. The last one where several people mentioned that this was a successful meeting and a fruitful discussion, and therefore this feedback encourages us maybe to go on with a similar format in the next future, not wait for a year. But maybe we will think about this. We will try to make kind of summary. What very important is that we show that we have really perfect and scientists amongst us, and also practitioners. And this is the mixture. We need scientific evidence and also practical evidence on the other hand. this bridge is very important to bring something on the way, and we see that the forest, as Bill mentioned, is still the same. But if you're doing something just for 5 years, do something different, it will change rapidly. You don't believe if you have not the experience, but if you go in another direction, the results will be measurable also after some years, at least 5 to 10 years. So therefore, this should encourage us all to go out to the forest to make some dots on the trees, as this picture was used before. Yeah, I think I want to thank to Anne Brown. She was moderating our last annual meeting, virtually meeting in last July, and she did her job very well. So thank you very much for this contribution, and also to all of you in the list. Still, we have 71 participants. This forum helps us to stay together. That's very important also for our community. And I see that some of the colleagues extra dressed with the Pro Silva polo shirts to show that they're, we know this. And I hope that we can find a kind of meeting in this format before our annual meeting. So maybe in the next 2 months or so. The meeting will be in Luxembourg. Hopefully it will now, after 2 years delay. We have the excursion program. You see the dates on the website, and we will update the program soon so that the registration process can start, and that we hopefully will meet not in virtual format, but in real format in the forest of Luxembourg in June. So yeah, thank you for participation, for your contributions. And if you have some comments that you want to write to us, so please send in some mails, whatever you want. It's important that we are in a permanent discussion, in a permanent move. And I think some of the words that Yuri mentioned are also very important, that we must face critics, that we must face different questions, and that we are not a religion, but we are a living organism as an organization also. So therefore, this is important to deal with all these critics and to be flexible and adaptable for the future. In Austria, we just want to set up also a kind of webinar where we were able now to have Christian Ammer from University Göttingen and another guy from BFW in Vienna, and we will want to face how can Close-to-Nature-Forestry can improve in climate change with all these problems of different tree species, of also genetics and epigenetic effects and so on. So this is a wide field to discuss, and we try to develop these formats of discussion. So thank you for participation, and stay well at home, so we have not to travel. So I hope maybe I will go outside and take my skis and go up to the mountain for an hour to find some fresh air for my head and all these thoughts. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody, bye-bye, and thank you for the huge number of guests that came in.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for your invitation at all and presentation. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye. Eckhart, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. Hopefully we see in Luxembourg this June. Bye-bye.
Nico, switch the camera on. We want to see you. Yeah. Greetings to Greece.
How are you?
Fine. Okay.
Next all. Hopefully we meet each other. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
by hopeful see Luxembourg.
I still don't know who's the iPad. M13 iPad.
Oh, that's me. It's attested so I can see the user point of view.
You are the
yeah.
second line. Okay.
Just, you know, so I can see what everybody else is seeing. I'm going to just close it down. If that's okay. I think we've.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.